Hi everyone, I hope you have been well. Let me double check and make sure I'm recording. Yep, I am. Hope you've been well. I know that I am a little bit late in videotaping today. I suspected, for those of you who've been following me for a while on my blog, I suspected honestly that right around episode 7 or 8 was when this semester was going to get the better of me and things were going to just kind of get very stressful, and it's true. It happened again, episode 7, and here we go. But thankfully, we're trying this new YouTube video recapping thing, so it should be a little easier. Still shave off like 2 or 3 hours of my blogging time and all goodness. So anyway, I hope you are ready for another video recap. And for those of you, I've actually got my little Snoopy mug filled with some warm or hot coffee, just to wet my whistle if I need to from all the talking. So let's go ahead and get started. Episode 7 it's good. I don't know how else to explain it. Let's do the quick recap, and I'll do musings in between as I think of them, and probably at the end if I can. So episode 7 starts off, or picks up, with Yeol coming upon the scene where Kang-chi is being kind of slashed around by Cho Gon-eun's, evil men. I'm just going to call them evil henchmen. But anyway, she's about to go and help them, or help Kang-chi ward off the evil guys. But then she starts seeing the remnants of those little fireflies, the Kumyo fireflies, and then it stops her short, and then she thinks back to the last time she had seen those little fireflies, and how that was when Kang-chi had collapsed onto her shoulder from sheer exhaustion. And then as she watches, literally she sees Kang-chi transform into the Kumyo. And the next scene, what you see is Yeol running through the forest in sheer panic, which we don't normally see her in. And Kwon happens to kind of come upon her at that point, and he's like, Yeol-ashi, which is, Mistress Yeol. And it takes her a split second to realize that she's looking at a friendly face because she was so out of her wits' end. And she then says something's wrong. Something terrible is wrong, I think. And then they hear Kang-chi's, Kumyo growl in the background where he's still dealing with Cho Gon-eun's henchmen. And so she and Kwon quickly vacate the premise because Yeol realizes she needs to go and report this to her father. Let me double check and make sure. I've got my iPad here with me. Well, anyway, in the meantime, what happens is, as they're making their way out of the mountainside, Kang-chi dispatches the last henchman, and then he stumbles away, and from sheer exhaustion, because remember, his body's not used to the Kumyo supernatural powers flowing through him, he collapses onto the mountainside ground, and then the rain starts. Well, we then flash or cut scene to Chongjo and what's been going on with her, and she has now finally arrived at her destination, which is, as we suspected, the brothel. And so the headmistress comes out to have her come in, and she refuses, very much like Seolhwa did in First Generation. And I will say this episode, more than any other episode, really harkens back to some allusions from the first 2 episodes. So anyway, Chongjo says, over my dead body, basically, if I die, I die, but I will refuse to cross over that threshold. And so the headmistress basically commands her servants to strip the girl and tie her in the onto the tree trunk. And then they do that, and of course Chongjo is just stunned, and she's sputtering and saying, you wretch, and all of the such. Well, anyway, as the headmistress goes back inside, leaving Chongjo in the evening cold air strapped to the trunk of a tree, the head servant, the female one and the male one, they kind of muse to themselves, hey, what's going on? Our headmistress hasn't done this in the past 20 years, ever since we had that incident with Moon-seolwa way back when. And so that's what goes on over there. Well, into the rain, Sojong shows up, and he sees the remnants of the little bracelet beads, and then the look on his face is one of disgust and trepidation of what's going on. So that takes care of the situation with Sojong. In the meanwhile, Yeol and Kwon have made it back to Tam Pyongjun's place, and they are reporting to the father what has transpired, and Yoru says something horrible has gone on. She says that Kangchi has kind of transformed into this Superman, natural monster right before her eyes. And, she knows that it's still Kangchi, but at the same time, she reports that he's not Kangchi. And then Tam Pyeongjun remembers the incident of 20 years ago, where Gu Wol-young, the father, had done that too. And then he remembers how Seowa had denied being pregnant, but he realizes that she must have been pregnant and given birth to a half human, half Kunyu child. And so he suspects that that is Kangchi. And so he's about to go and kind of capture him or what have you. But we then learn that Lee Sun-shin is actually with them at the conference table, and Lee Sun-shin says, no, because we need to make sure that Kangchi is part of our group, our man. Because if Cho Gon-eun is able to find out about Kangchi, his supernatural powers, and then is somehow able to get him on his side, then anything we do and everything we do is going to be stymied by this man. It's going to be blocked, and we're ultimately going to lose. So anyway, as Tam Pyeongjun and Lee Sung-shin get ready to discuss matters further, Tam Pyeongjun actually tells Yeol to go home to her room and stay there, that her part of the task is done or whatnot. And then, so she leaves in a huff, because what happens is she's upset with Kwon because in the midst of that conference, Kwon says to Tam Pyeongjun, yeah, we need to find Kangchi and kill him before he does anything wrong. And Yeol just looks at him like shocked, like how could you think about killing Kangchi, another human being, and all of this stuff. So anyway, she stalks out, and then Kwon follows her. And he says, why do you care so much or whatnot? And she just looks at him and she's like, do you have a stone for a head? I told you he saved my life. But anyway, before that though, she tells him, because he tries to have her slow down and stuff. And she's like, sometimes when I look at you, you remind me of an emotionless wall. She's like, that's right. You only do your task, huh? And your task was to just guard me and make sure nothing comes, no harm comes to me. Well, anyway, of course, that's not the case. And Kwon, even though he masks the hurt from her, as viewers, we know that obviously her words have, hurt him, because he wants to be able to say more to her, but the man has such a rigid sense of duty and of hierarchy, if you will, that he doesn't feel like it's his place to confess his feelings for her. That's my thought. Anyway, so she goes to her bedroom, and you see her thinking. Well, that next morning, Kwon comes in to right outside her bedroom, saying, your father would like a word with you. And then he peeks inside, but there's no word, and she is gone. So sometime either really early in the morning or sometime at night, she has gone off to try to see if she can find Kangchi and figure out what's going on. Well, in the meantime, Cho Gon-eun's evil, head henchman guy reports to his boss that the 7 men that they had sent after Taeseo and Kangchi have disappeared without a trace. And so my suspicion is Sojong did something and cleared the forest of those men's bodies, right? Yeah. Oh, hold on, Bentley. Anyway, sorry. So Sojong has, I'm sure Sojong has done something with those bodies. Anyway, Cho Gon-eun says, Kangchi is very interesting for him to be able to make 7 men disappear. Very interesting, wouldn't you say? And the head henchman is a bit nervous, it feels like, because maybe he is a bit insecure about the fact that if they find Kangchi, Kangchi may become his replacement. I don't know. But the look on his face was a little bit odd. Well, in the morning, Kangchi wakes up and he finds himself in the forest, and he's like, what's going on? So he has like flashes of memory from the previous night, and so he runs back to that place. Because what had happened was, as he was stumbling away from the dead men, you hear him just repeating over and over again, I don't have time, I have to make it in time to save Cheongjo, and then he collapses, right? Well, he wakes up, and then he remembers, in flashback, all those moments from the previous night. And so he rushes back, and no men. And he was wondering to himself, did I dream the whole thing? Well, Sojong shows up, and then Sojong pretty much kind of takes him to task, saying, I told you something horrible was going to happen. Why would you do this and all of this stuff? And Kang-chi at first doesn't believe him. And then what causes him to believe Sojong finally about the whole Kumio, and Sojong tells him the story about his father and things like that, and his mother, is when Kang-chi gets really mad because Sojong's saying, you know, you're not really full human. He like grabs Sojong by the shirt and or the front, and he like shakes him, and then he notices his hands have like morphed into Kumyo, right? And then he drops them very quickly. And then he's like, oh my gosh, it's true. And then he like scampers to the ground, picks up those beads, the little remnant beads, and then he pulls them up in his hands. And it's so sad and heartbreaking because plaintively he says, turn me back to my original form. Do it. Turn me back, please. And he's just like begging. Well, as he falls to his knees in anguish and, you know, just crying because he realizes for him, the thing that he has always wanted was a home, a place where he knew he belonged. And that's why he really adored Merchant Park and his family and the inn, right? Because that was his home, because he, you know, he was an orphan and they had taken him in and all this stuff. So the realization that in his present Kumio form, he cannot ever return, it crushes him, and he literally just falls to his knees weeping. Well, Yeolwoo comes upon that scene, and she, number one, has heard everything that Sojong has told Kang-chi, and then she sees Kang-chi in despair. Well, we then flash over to Chongjo, who is now the object of ridicule very much as Seoa was, you know, in episodes 1 and 2, and then she finally loses consciousness. And all throughout those, 4 days that she was tied to the tree, she kept calling for her brother and Kang-chi, saying, why isn't anyone coming to help me? Why isn't anyone coming to help me? Which, to some extent, you guys know I was a little bit irritated by that, because I'm thinking, you know what, don't expect to be saved. Try to save yourself. And that's actually, incidentally, a lesson that the head brothel mistress tells her. Don't expect to live through life now on the strength of your father's name. What you need to do is be able to, make a living or somehow survive on your own merits and such. So we'll talk about that. But anyway, Chongjo eventually loses consciousness and she sags against a tree trunk, and then the head mistress, which we know, the head, brothel woman, we've always known that she is in some respects kind-hearted. It's just that her profession, that's her livelihood, right? Well, she brings Chongjo down from the tree, and then she places her in a nice comfortable room. And when Chongjo wakes up and she sees this warm bowl of porridge, and remember, she hasn't eaten anything or had anything to drink because that was the punishment also, she starts to eat the porridge. And then when the head mistress, whom she hadn't seen, speaks up, Chongjo stops eating, right? And you can tell that her noble woman's, inflexible, morality or whatnot is going to come up again to the surface. And that's when the headmistress tells her, look, if you want to, continue to live that way, then don't bother eating the porridge. But if you realize that no one's coming to save you, and that at this point you have to, in order to survive, you need to be able to accept your lot in life and then figure out ways to survive and such, then you can go ahead and pick up that spoon and continue to eat your porridge, right? And there's this just very heartbreaking moment where Chongjo, you see her spoon literally shaking a little bit as she weighs those options, and she realizes she has to, eat the porridge and at least try to figure out how to survive. And I think that will mark the difference between her and Seoa, because we know that Seoa would have just continued to resist and, ultimately died starving, right? Well, anyway, while Chongjo is dealing with her destiny that way, Yeolwoo, it's so cool. She finds her way into the Kumyo safe haven. And how does she find? She follows Kang-chi and Sojong. So you see her looking all around, just being amazed by the beauty of the cavern. And then I guess for a while she's, kind of keeping watch, because Kang-chi, you see him moping, looking at his reflection, and obviously his Kumyo self will not recede this time, right? And Sojong, as Yeolwoo was watching, Sojong comes to him with some food from the village, and he says, here, you can't not eat for 4 days. You need to get your strength and figure out what to do and all of this stuff. And of course, Kangchi just refuses. And so it's so cute. Yeol literally walks up, and Sojong's a little bit surprised to see this woman, right? But she walks up, and then she like back, smacks him on the head. And it throws Kangchi off, right? He whirls around, he's like, what? And then he sees Yeol, and he's like stunned. And for the first time, Yeol is looking directly at Kangchi with his, kumyo eyes and such, right? But because she doesn't run away scared, Kangchi's like, what are you doing here? He's like, don't you think I look a little weird? And she's like, yeah, but you've always been weird. What of it, And she's like, yeah, it's weird. And then Kangchi is so surprised, and he's like, don't you find it, like what's going on, and how come you're not running away and things like that. And ultimately, Yeol is so great. She basically tells him that no matter what your outward appearance is like, ultimately you are still Chaegangchi, are you not? And when she says that, literally his eyes become back to like human eyes again, right? But before Sojong or Yeol can say, hey, you're back to human, he lets his insecurities and doubts overwhelm him again, and then his kumyo eyes show up, and at that point, then he doesn't want to listen to anything else she says. But the other thing that I forgot to mention, before she says you are ultimately, though, the essence of you is still Chaegangchi, was that, Kangchi was ranting on and on about how he no longer had a home to return to, and that, he would have rather have died than live like this. And like she literally smacks him again, saying, you know what, you forget the most important thing is you're still alive. She's like, last night when I saw you fighting those men or being, like slashed by those men, I was so afraid you were going to die, and you're not. You're still alive. And she's like, that is such a huge thing. You're still alive. In whatever form you're in, though, you're still alive. And then, of course, she says, you're ultimately Chaegangchi still, right? Well, anyway, she tries to get him to eat the, food that Sojong brought, and of course, Kangchi doesn't, and, he stomps off, and Sojong tells her not to follow him because and he says, everyone has their own destiny or a path to walk, and Kangchi needs to fight his own battles, which is that now there is this kumyo and human self. So he needs to fight so that the human self can have mastery over the kumyo self, right? Very much like how Woryong had the human side always in control for the most part, right? Well, as Sojong watches, though, Yeol interacting with Kangchi, he wonders if those two, and then it just kind of leaves it at that as his voice trails. Well, I personally thought about it since the time I watched the episode this morning and now when I'm filming, and a part of me wonders, because the faith that, hold on, let me have a drink of coffee. Alright, so we're back. But the fate that Sojong was talking about was that one of them may die. And I was thinking to myself, well, duh, because if Kangchi becomes immortal Kumyo, then of course Yeol is going to die before, he does. And if he remains human, though, then he ends up dying, instead of living immortally and things like that. And who knows? I mean, my speculation, though, is I'm hoping that the ending will be a happy one, but you never know. Anyway, you guys aren't interested in that as much. Let's continue on with the recap. So the next morning, of course, or that morning, the inn is being now re-inhabited, I guess you will, by Cho Kwon-eun, and he comes in with all the pomp and circumstance. The servants are there, and the magistrate basically says, this is your new owner. All of the servants, you are no longer free, of course, but you have now been bonded into servitude, or you are now, in essence, slaves. Well, Cho Kwon-eun then says, bring the prisoners in, and in walks Chaegangchi's father, who thankfully has not been executed for, helping to let Taeseo and Kangchi escape. And then there is Taeseo and Cheongjo's mother. Well, one thing leads to another, and Cheongjo's mother is just, she refuses to kowtow to this man. And so she basically, and it was so refreshing as a viewer to finally hear someone just chew him out, right? So she says, you may outwardly be the master of this place, but you will never, ever assume all of this inn's value and, that role. And the way she says it, it implies that he's not ever going to really realize the worth of the inn, which we find out is true. He doesn't realize that there is this huge treasure behind a certain passageway. And my suspicion is Merchant Park, being the type of husband that he was, would have definitely let his wife in on, the vast riches that he held in that passageway. Well, anyway, she continues to pour insult on him, and then he comes and he tells her, shut your mouth, right? He's like, close your mouth. And because she had basically said, yes, welcome to this new place, because this is going to be your gravesite, right? Well, when he takes the sword and he literally like goes whoop, and like stops right by her neck, she looks at it, and then she gets a sense of determination, and she grabs his sword, and then she plunges it into her stomach, and everyone is just stunned. Chogonung is stunned because he wasn't expecting that. And yes, I was a little stunned too, but I kept thinking to myself, it does fit her character, in that she's all or nothing, and I'm sure now with her children, she doesn't know where. She doesn't want to live the rest of her life as a servant and all of that stuff, so she kills herself as a way to probably join her husband in the afterlife and all of that. But as I watch this, a part of me just, I wish that she had shown that she was a stronger character, because, oftentimes living is the harder and braver thing to do, and I would have so loved to have had this character stay and fight so that she could reunite with her children and actually show Tessa and Cheongjo just how strong their mother, is. Well, she doesn't. She ends up dying, and then as she continues in her breath, like to pour like curses at Chogonung, he then takes the sword and actually deals her a fatal blow. And so she then collapses, and the servants are all huddled around her, mourning her death. And with her last moments of consciousness, in her mind you hear her say Tessa and Cheongjo, and then that's it. So she dies. Well, Chogonung then goes into Merchant Park's, not bed chambers, but his private office, and he sits down. He basically is enjoying the moment and thinking, wow, this is a great, acquisition and whatnot. And the merchant's like, oh, not merchant, but the magistrate's like, oh, sir, this fits you so well and all of this stuff. And Chogonung is, kind of still disturbed by what the Mrs. Park has said. So he's like, so are you saying that this suits me well because this is going to be my gravesite? And he just is a very prickly little person. But anyway, the magistrate is like backpedaling. He's like, no, of course not. And then Chogonung says, she says something about my not ever assuming the true value of this place. What do you think she meant? Do you think that there's something, hidden? And the magistrate says, oh, no, she was probably just saying that because she was angry and vindictive and all of this stuff. Well, there's a really great scene, because what happens is, as Chogonung is sitting there, the camera spans, and right behind the little shield or the divider, you see then the picture that's on the wall, and then inside the secret passageway that still has all of that loot. Well, as the camera spans that, we then cut scene to Lee Sun-shin, who is looking at his, armored boat plans, and you see him just thinking, how do I get this boat built when my financial backing has been stymied by this Chogonung guy, right? Well, next thing you see is Kang-chi in the cave, just in anguish and like moaning and groaning, saying, oh my gosh, someone help me, someone help me. And Yeol is outside concerned, and so is Sojong, but although Sojong is just casually, I don't know, it almost looked like he was sewing or something like that. But anyway, that's when Sojong tells Yeol, you know what, you gotta let people fight out their own, destiny, figure out what roads they're gonna, pack and stuff. Right now, Kang-chi is in there fighting his kumyo and human self. So we need to make sure, we need to see which side is going to win. Well, inside, Kang-chi is, literally just saying, please someone help me, please someone help me. And then from outside you hear Yeol say, Chaegangchi, remember who you are. You're Chaegangchi. Don't ever forget that. And of course that momentarily stops Kang-chi and kind of gives him hope. But then again, the fears and the regrets and, the anguish of, oh my gosh, I don't have a home to return to, and all of that come crowding in, so that he basically ends up reverting to kumyo form again. Well, what's sad is that ultimately he lets out this huge growl, and then Sojong tells Yeol, I think the Kumio has won the battle. You better quickly leave because your life may be in danger. And honestly, the way he says that with the urgency and Yora's reaction to it, it does, like freak you out, and you don't blame her for running out of there as if her life depended on it, right? Well, in the meantime, Sojong then goes into the cave, and you see him battling Kangchi, trying to get him to see sense and saying, you gotta fight this. And of course, the Kumio's voice is now, like Kangchi's voice has taken on this supernatural Kumio voice, right? But what's really cool in this episode that, you find out is the reason why Woryong, the father, had been protected by the mountainside, and why Kangchi, in effect, is protected by the mountainside. Remember how when they were running away, some of the mountain, shrubberies had covered him and protected him, right? Well, it turns out that the Kumyo has been protecting. So Woryong has been protecting the mountain for for about 1,000 years. And so the mountain in return protects the Kumyo, which I thought was very interesting. Well, anyway, Yeol is freaked out. She runs home to her father's compound and there Kwon is reporting again to Tam Pyeongjun that he wasn't able to find Yeol-ashi, right? And now it's like third or fourth day, and so Tam Pyeongjun's like, where could that child be? Well, into that scene, then Yeol stumbles in, and she kind of sags against a little post, and then Kwon and Tam Pyeongjun are like, what's going on? Are you okay? And things like that. And she says, please help. Something's gone terribly wrong. I think Kangchi's in danger and all of this stuff, right? Well, we then find. Tam Pyeongjun decides to do, to help or do whatever, right? Well, in the meantime, Chungjo is now nicely dressed, and a prostitute, the head prostitute that is keeping Chogonung company, the really evil one. Well, she shows up, and without anyone's permission, she takes Chungjo out of her room. And of course, Chungjo doesn't know that this is not someone from the brothel. So she follows, or if she is from the brothel, she's not sent by the headmistress. So Chungjo follows, and yeah, you guys know, right? Chogonung is waiting, and the prostitute who brings, Chungjo is saying, what are you doing? Go inside. And she's like, no, I refuse to, I'm not going to, right? And then Chogonung's like, it's okay. Just as we appreciate good wine, and there is the looking first, and then the smelling and the savoring before we drink, I can do the same thing. He's like, my eyes are pleased just looking at her right now. And I'm just like, pedophile. Yeah, we talked about this, right? Well, anyway, Chungjo is deathly just sick and just freaked out. And what's thankful is that the head servant had seen that one prostitute take Chungjo out of the room. And so the head servant, reports to her mistress saying, this prostitute has taken Chungjo out of the room. Well, just in the nick of time, as the Chogonung mean prostitute slaps Chungjo, the head mistress shows up, she stops her, and then has Chungjo go back to her bedroom, and then she deals in some respect with Chogonung saying, I'm sorry, sir, that you had to see this type of scene. And then Chogonung makes this very interesting comment. He says, very interesting that this is very reminiscent of 20 years ago, wouldn't you say? And he then gives her a warning saying, very much like 20 years ago, I hope that you won't make the mistake of sending a substitute in. And you're just kind of like, great. So he really is going to make good on his threat, the thing that he had told Merchant Park, saying, every night I'm going to comfort your daughter and things like that. So I'm hoping Kangchi literally just the man, but anyway, I won't be, you didn't hear it. I take that back. I'm not that bloodthirsty, right? Anyway, so what we see though is Yeol has finally asked her father, please help me, right? Well, in the meantime, Kangchi has kind of thrown Sojong to the side, and he literally is on the rampage because he wants to kill everyone. And Sojong had heard Kangchi's voice saying, I want to kill everyone, which is why he had turned to Yeol and said, hey, leave, I think it's dangerous right now, right? Well, as Kangchi is stalking through the village, and then he sees kind of the wanted poster for himself. He tears that down. He's about to continue on his way when he is confronted with Kwon. And Kwon basically, he and Kwon kind of start fighting, and then it takes several men to restrain him and all of those things, right? Well, he finally gets captured in a sense, and then Yeol shows up, and so, and then Tam Pyeongjun shows up, and Kang-chi kind of like calms down enough to ask, what are you doing? And, I don't have a beef with you and all of this stuff, right? Well, Kang-chi would have actually continued, and his Kumyo self would have probably, surfaced, and he would have been able to kill, Kwon and everything. So what happens is Sojung shows up and he throws like a makeshift or a substitute bracelet bead at Kang-chi's wrist. So, Kang-chi's like about to do this and strike this deadly, Kumyo blow to Kwon, and then the bracelet wraps around his wrist, and then he reverts back to Kang-chi human form, right? And that was how they were able to subdue Kang-chi and kind of, in a sense, capture him. Well, what happens though is that Sojong, tells him, that you need to really fight this, and that if you take the bracelet off, you are then risking never being able to be Kang-chi again. The Kumyo beast will consume him, basically, right? And then Yeol shows up into the scene, and then Tam Pyeongjun shows up into the scene as well, right? Well, then they're wondering, what should I do, and things like that, and Tam Pyeongjun basically, I need to make sure, hold on. Yeah. So Yeol was like, well, what should we do now? And Tam Pyeongjun says, turn him over to the authorities, send him to jail. And she's just stunned. She's like, what? Father, you promised you were going to help him. And he's like, it's not what I want. I am helping him. This is what Lee Sun-shin, Sir Lee Sun-shin or Lord Lee Sun-shin wants us to do, right? And so they turn him over, and it's really interesting because you think that he's been betrayed, but there's a deeper purpose to this, right? So Kang-chi is robed, and then he's brought before the magistrate. And of course, Cho Gon-ung is again shielded in the side room. And the magistrate says, will you confess to your crime? And Kang-chi's like, what crime? Tell me what crime I've committed, and then maybe I'll tell you. And the villagers are outside saying, yeah, I can't believe he's the one who killed Merchant Park and blah, 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 right? Well, what happens is, he is about to get killed or, punished. And then Lee Sun-shin shows up, and, Kang-chi, of course, had, pretty much let the cat out of the bag, saying, you are the one, who did all of these things. And then Lee Sun-shin shows up, and everyone's kind of like, who is this, right? And Cho Gon-ung very quickly and the magistrate quickly find out that this is a man who outranks them. And Lee Sun-shin says, I have heard that one of my men is in your custody under a misunderstanding or something to that effect. And he said, I sent a man here, and I came quickly because I found out there was a misunderstanding and that he had been taken into custody. And then he turns to Kang-chi and he's like, Kang-chi, are you okay? And Kang-chi's just stunned. Everyone is stunned because they didn't realize that Kang-chi had been acting under the orders of Lee Sun-shin, which of course he hadn't been, but this is Lee Sun-shin's big, greater plan to make sure that, number one, in the eyes of the villager, Kang-chi is now exonerated of the, suspicion that he had killed Merchant Park. But then secondly, now it ties Kang-chi with Lee Sun-shin. So I'm hoping that episode 8 will, turn things around a little bit. So anyway, that's it. Like I said, I love the fact that Yeol is very different. She is very much assertive, and she's so incredibly loyal here. You hear her stand up for Kang-chi, and even though she must be deadly afraid to look at this man with green eyes, she stands her ground because in her mind, this is still Kang-chi, and I think that is ultimately what's going to be the difference between her and Cheongjo. She recognizes that that is still Kang-chi regardless of his outward appearance. And what's really sad is, that scene that I had talked about where, Yeol had gotten mad at Kwon, and she had stalked off and things like that. Well, in a conversation that Yeol has with her father, the father asks her, because she's so adamant about his helping Kang-chi, he says, do you like him? And she's like, Father, no, he has someone that he likes. It's not like that. So, she never answers, no, I don't like him, but she just tells him, oh, Kangchi has someone that he likes. It's not like that. So, anyway, so there is that. And so I just love the fact that she is loyal. She's going to stay with him, which is very different from the other people. And I think the thing that differentiates, as I mentioned, Seowa from Chungjo is the fact that Seowa would have rather died than to live to see, a day of vengeance. And Chungjo is different. She is choosing to survive and to try to do something. You see remnants of Seowa's, fatality mentality or fatal mentality in Mrs. Park in the way that she committed suicide. So. Anyway, that was it. I'm going to try to keep this short, the musings short. We're already at 35 minutes. But before I leave, I want to give a little shout out. For those of you who know, little Hannah is our youngest twinkling. I believe she's from Singapore. Her mom, SHL, has just told me on the blog that she's been really enjoying watching these video recaps, and that little Hannah has been hearing my voice. So thank you. I hope, little Hannah, that you are growing well, not giving your mom too many sleepless nights, and that you are getting used to hearing Gracie Mo's voice, right? Or Snoopy's Twinkies Mo's voice. So anyway, I just wanted to, give a little shout out to little Hannah. I hope you are all well. I will see you hopefully tomorrow with episode 8. For those of you who are interested, head over to the website and you will see pictures there as well. So take care, everyone. Bye.